By the year 2050, Vietnam intends to execute a complete structural overhaul of its entire national logistics sector. Outlined in Decision 2229, this 25-year roadmap addresses a specific macroeconomic challenge. In standard economic models, logistics is a friction cost. When a country optimizes its supply chain and logistical costs drop, the sector's total share of the national GDP typically shrinks. This graph illustrates a paradox. Vietnam intends to compress logistics costs to 12 to 15% of GDP by 2035, while scaling its economic value add to 7 to 9% by 2050. Decoupling these metrics is difficult, requiring the sector to charge less while producing significantly more value. Surviving this decoupling zone requires a total systemic overhaul, positioning the sector as a proactive driver of international trade flows. To achieve this, the 2025 to 2050 roadmap functions as a rigid structural engineering blueprint rather than a simple chronological timeline. The targets set for 2050 depend on specific foundational layers established decades prior. This isometric model shows the 4 sequential layers of that architecture: digitization, standardization, hyperconnectivity, and circularity. The blueprint follows a rule of strict dependency. Any attempt to skip a phase causes the upper layers to fail, as the entire system lacks a stable base. Understanding the realized end state of 2050 requires starting with the bedrock being laid down for 2030. The immediate priority for 2030 is aggressive cost optimization, achieved through sweeping enterprise digitization. In this digitalization layer, the government mandate requires that 80% of logistics enterprises adopt and utilize digital transformation solutions. This digital layer must be paired with physical infrastructure, including the completion of Phase 1 arterial expressways and the integration of deep-water port systems. Combining early digital tracking with high-capacity physical expressways supports the expected explosion in cross-border e-commerce. This alignment dictates the rapid expansion of last-mile delivery networks and large-scale fulfillment centers. During this era, data is digitized, but decision-making and flow control remain under the management of human operators. The 2030 phase establishes the massive, clean data-gathering web required for future artificial intelligence to function. By 2035, the medium-term strategy concludes, shifting focus from domestic stabilization to international integration. The primary benchmark for success is breaking into the top 40 of the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index. Securing that ranking requires a structural shift. Domestic manufacturers must stop handling their own internal transport and warehousing. This necessitates third-party and fourth-party logistics outsourcing, delegating supply chain management to specialized, dedicated networks. This standardization layer illustrates the 2035 target, which pushes the national logistics outsourcing rate to between 70 and 80%, consolidating volume through centralized hubs. Reaching this high outsourcing rate creates economies of scale, directly driving the total national logistics costs down to the 12 to 15% target. In the 2040s, logistics evolves into a knowledge economy ecosystem. The critical hardware upgrade of this era is the operation of the North-South High-Speed Railway. High-speed rail alters domestic freight architecture by moving heavy load capacity away from road networks, reducing transit times and highway congestion. Simultaneously, international transshipment hubs upgrade to fully automated smart port models, operating at maximum capacity. This hyperconnectivity layer demonstrates how operating hardware at this speed requires real-time, multimodal coordination managed by autonomous AI algorithms. Powered by this AI network, the roadmap elevates Ho Chi Minh City into a premier logistics and financial hub for Asia by 2045. The defining trait of this network is supply chain resilience, the ability to absorb shocks and reroute instantly. This extreme resilience is a strict prerequisite for participating in complex global manufacturing, such as the semiconductor industry. A high-tech manufacturing sector requires this real-time, AI-driven multimodal transport grid to guarantee precise delivery. The 2050 endpoint requires total alignment with national net zero and sustainability commitments. This requires the conversion of all transport fleets and warehouse operations to green energy sources. This top layer maps out the final operational paradigm, the implementation of reverse logistics and an absolute circular supply chain. Recovering and recycling products after they reach the consumer is notoriously difficult to execute at scale. The architectural sequence is critical here. The AI layer of 2040 and the data layer of 2030 are the requirements that allow an individual item to be tracked and routed backwards through the system. By this stage, the outsourcing rate reaches 80 to 90%, representing peak economic specialization. Achieving net zero serves as the ultimate proof of a flawlessly optimized, mathematically perfect logistics ecosystem. Operating this technological stack requires an evolution in human capital. The workforce must transition from muscle-based physical labor toward technology control and high-level cognitive labor. Manual sorters and drivers are replaced by warehouse automation engineers and supply chain data analysts. The roadmap sets steep targets. 90% of the labor force must be formally trained, with 50% holding university degrees. Investments in AI and high-speed rail yield no return without a specialized, intellectual workforce to calibrate and govern them. This assembled stack visualizes the complete 25-year structural progression, moving from 2030's digital tracking to the autonomous circular loop of 2050. This structure resolves the initial macroeconomic paradox, reducing relative cost while increasing total economic value. The blueprint achieves this through compounding technological efficiencies and system-wide economies of scale. Reconstructing the sector turns it into the primary driver of international trade flows. By successfully building this supply chain architecture, the nation secures its strategic backbone and maintains critical competitive dominance on the world stage.